Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today. We are excited to have you here. Our session today is titled Automating User Access Provisioning, and our presenter today is Preston Leftwich, who will introduce himself in just a moment. My name is Stephanie Anderson. I'm the Global Webinar Manager here at Pathlock. Before I go any further, I have a few housekeeping items. Preston, can you go to the next slide?
There you go.
If you cannot hear this audio, click on Preferences and then Audio. From there, you can check to see if you are using the appropriate audio device. You can also click the play sound to check if you can hear the sound coming through your speakers. This presentation will take approximately 30 minutes, and there will be a Q&A session following the presentation. So please type any questions into the questions box on your control panel for our speaker to answer at the end of the event. To prevent background noise, everyone is on mute. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Preston.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. So for any of you who have not met me previously, whether that's in another life or on another webinar, my name is Preston Leftwich, and I am a technical manager here at Pathlock, previously part of the QSoft group. My primary role is to kind of talk through application process and discuss how the product functions and how things can get architected to help you meet a need in particular. And today we're going to speak specifically about access provisioning and kind of best practices and how that process should work. If you have questions, please do that. Please do drop them in the chat. And if you'd like to actually go through some of the product application demonstrations, please drop your name on the chat and we'll reach out and do a demo with you. I can do a demo in about half an hour or so usually. Just a quick kind of overview for those of you who knew us from the QSoft days. We actually merged in with 7 other companies. The concept here was to kind of give a cross-platform, cross-application solution. The biggest win, and I've been doing this for about 20 years, as far as I was concerned, and the part that got me excited was looking at accessibility across major applications when you have multiple companies using multiple applications to do process. I'm old enough that I was there when we tried to do everything in one, when JD Edwards and Oracle and PeopleSoft all became like trying to get everything done in one single platform. And now the integration works, the APIs exist, the connectivity standardization exists to be able to take the best of breed from an application and push data back and forth. And so that's what we did, is we combined all of the leading applications across platforms to provide that sort of under layer of connectivity so we can check for GRCs and SOD and all the other types of controls and risk assessments that you need across the platform. So that it's been exciting for me because I'm able to kind of stretch my legs across the ERP. I've worked with JD Edwards and SAP and PeopleSoft and Oracle products for a long time. So it's been an interesting process to get this all lined up, and it's very exciting, I think, going forward. So with that said, we're going to talk about provisioning, specifically kind of what the checks and balances are for, what it means to give an audit trail for a request, and then some of the bonus parts that we can get into with the SOD validation piece as we go through the process of provisioning a user into the system. And the idea is a lot of us look at it in the process flow, that you get a request for a role, that role gets approved, and then that role gets assigned, and then there's some sort of supervision or supervisor. Whether that's a verb or a noun is up to you, but the idea that there's some accountability to that sort of simplified process. And what I think we find is that in reality, the process can be a lot more complicated than that. The idea is that nowadays what we're seeing is that supervisors create those requests for users. And yes, I've worked a number of clients and help desk solutioning with groups to say yes. Sometimes the employee sends in the ticket that says, hey, I need access to whatever it is. But that's usually driven by their boss telling them or their supervisor telling them, hey, you need access to this set of applications in the system. Make it so you're just like Dave or Mary or someone in the organization. And so what we want is there to be some sort of request that's by default, right, it's being reviewed and considered by someone who's in control of that role or that responsibility. The next thing is a lot of us work on sort of the help desk solutioning piece, where that is passed off either to an internal help desk or an external third-party system. And what we find a lot through doing application reviews with people and working with provisioning processes is that there tends to be a path of least resistance. And that path of least resistance means that someone is doing exactly that, copying Bob, Dave, Mary's profile and sticking it on your system, which gives you inherently lots of additional application access potentially that you don't need, or combines your system with it. So that automated SOD check, that's what we're talking about today as far as what you get when you bring our products on and work with our product system. You're able to actually take that request and automate the SOD piece so that the existing segregation of duties that you would have in place would then be applied to the request, both for the existing roles that that person may have. If it's out of the box new, then all of the combinations of roles that they have, or if it's existing in a new role or a change in roles, to then take the net of what the request is, update the SOD matrix looking at that data and give you a response, so that someone who is not in a trained position for understanding what SOD means, maybe not a risk compliance person, but someone who is working to help us can interpret the data very straightforward, because the SOD check is done by default and the results are prepared right there for them to review. So that process of handling that help desk, one of the things we worked very closely with some of the major ticket purveyors is to create that Z file integration that we all are kind of used to in JD Edwards, and other integration companies have landing pages for their data. That data then is run through that SOD check as it's available. So when that ticket system generates that data outbound, that SOD check gets done before anything else is done with the data, which is a benefit to everyone, because it takes the I forgot to run it, I handled this ticket without doing the actual work, I just manually sent it through. Those kinds of things don't happen as often. And if there's an override where you need to push data through the system, you can see that, but that decision's trackable and auditable, and we'll get to that in a minute. So from the sides of the approval side of things, right? So that SOD check that comes in to it is passing that first gate, if you will. What then happens is there's someone who manages that group of requests. Someone who's identified and managing that group of requests says, okay, the ticket's been created in the system, it's entered into the database, and it's waiting to be reviewed and approved past the SOD piece. So then there's clarity about whether their job is to now look and see from an org chart perspective it's the right responsibilities, or possibly from a process of was the right role requested. So it might not be an SOD check that's the issue. It might be that you've been granted access to inventory and that's not part of your function, and it's a mistake in the role assignment. So though kind of oversight there happens, and that approval, that eyes-on approval, gives us the ability to document and audit the fact that your data was checked and balanced ahead of time. And then from an assignment perspective, that approval piece, actually, once it's done, the assignment, the generation of the back-end records that create that role responsibility piece for that user, by accepting and working through the workbench, that's how that happens. They're actually able to utilize the application subset so that they can make the adjustment to the request and say, it's been approved on this side, go ahead and update the roles. They make sure the data is all in line and that the details have been met, and it becomes supervisory work. It's not typing up letters and typing up records and going and creating all of the back-end connectivity between the role and the user, and making sure that the expiration dates are set. All those kinds of maintenance pieces where they actually do the work, that's the automation piece that we're going to get out of this product as well. And from that perspective, what you'll get is you'll get that acceptance of the ticket, the review of the SOD automated, the acceptance of the assignment in the business side of it so that there's a business eyes on it, and then the automation of the actual application of that role based on the approval. So that's where that automation becomes part of and makes easy the parts of the puzzle that maybe don't exist within a normal flow of things. And then the business users themselves actually can log in and test and work through the data that they have been requested to utilize. And then from a back end, the auditors then can come back and look at the data that's been provided to, can audit the fact that on this day, Bob was requested to join this particular role, the process was approved, the SOD check was passed, all of that data and that transactional activity is captured on the same application side, and it's moved forward through the process. And what that then does is it allows the person who sort of oversees how that security and compliance is working, allows that purchase of that product to then oversee this entire kind of life cycle of work and validation that goes along with provisioning of a role. So from an idea, from looking at entry points into the system, the request itself, automation, right? The automation piece means that it gets handled sort of instantaneously. The minute that it gets put into the system, whether it's by an integration call, an API call that generates the records, or whether the help desk generates it. But the record itself, once it's created, that automation of processing expedites how quickly we can handle the provisioning turnaround, right? Nobody wants to provision user requests because of transfers or updates to our employee rosters and have that data last in the system for a week before they can't do their job, right? That's kind of what we all experience sometimes in our lifetime, and that's what we're trying to prevent. It eliminates the human error piece, which is that we can forget the email, we don't get to it, we forgot to forward it to the right people, we forgot to type in the data into a system of record and get the priority set properly on it. And the other automation piece that helps is that it standardizes the process so that everyone's aware of who's at what piece of the puzzle, who's at step A, who's at step J, and who's at step Z. And what you're allowed there then is this troubleshooting becomes much more efficient. If you have a process that you know that request hasn't been processed, the system displays if it's gone through the SOD check and approved, then it's pending that sort of workflow approval. We know who to help push along the process if necessary. So from an outbound, from a supervisor user putting that data into the system, they're the ones pushing it out of their queue and into the help desk or IT piece. That automation allows for a quicker response time. And then if we get into the processing side of things, right? So the automation piece clarifies that there isn't risk associated with whatever is in play today. So if you're running SOD checks today, and you're looking for segregation of duties, that automation, that audit management, where you're running an SOD check over and over again, what that does is it allows you to leverage that existing approved SOD to clarify that the risks that you've accepted as being part of that SOD are also being utilized before someone makes entry into your system. So while the ongoing audit is good for periodically checking to make sure there hasn't been anything that slipped through the cracks, that entry piece in, that first step in the door where someone gets that assignment, that clarifies right off the gate that they've not, at that point in time, they were not part of the SOD violation group because they passed the existing SOD checks. They're shared across platforms. Now, going forward, if something changes on the SOD matrix and that creates a violation, they get picked up on that second subsequent run of an SOD that's on the periodic side of things. But the idea is to stop them from ever making it into the system. And so clarifying the risk, and it also allows you, if there is a risk, to document what your disposition is. Are you going to allow them to continue because I'm short-staffed in a business unit that's in a smaller part of the country or the world where I only have 3 people in an office and I have to have someone put in POs and do the receiving? That's possible. If that's the case, it allows you to document that disposition right within the decision-making tree. And then on the standardizing the process, again, we come back to the idea of we standardize a process of how it gets handled. There becomes an expectation, right? What in IT we like to call the SLA, how well you can expect or how quickly you can expect data to be handled and processed. That's what we're trying to obtain here. So the outbound from the help desk IT people having it automated, pushed into the security processing piece, and it goes into the security tool to check and make sure that we've not broken any kind of violation provisioning piece on it. And then ultimately, the whole process itself becomes a documentation process, right? The automation that goes along with updating the roles, the notification that something doesn't pass the checks and balances that are being done, the audit trail that goes along with the reporting side of things. These pieces are all designed to give us the ability to look in the system, look at our specific request on a specific day, and understand exactly what happened. And all of that documentation is automated. There's no need to type in a bunch of answers to things. Records are kept and tracked as the buttons are pushed, and yays and nays are inventoried. Those are all auditable at the end. And that, again, gives us that standardized process that now when someone wants to look at what's going on, you're able to provide that data at a detail level that someone can look at. So out of our security tools and into that sort of record of data and history that can handle and be reviewed by audit, if you will. So all of those then sort of give us the point of what we're talking about from a design perspective. I'll take a moment to talk questions now if anybody happens to have anything, Steph, only in the sense of we're going to have to do the application demo separately. If anyone would like to look at the actual application in play, I'd be happy to walk you through that and do a demo in any time. But is there any questions, Stephanie, on our group?
Thank you, Preston. Again, if you have any questions, please add them now into the question box. And again, if you would like to see a demo of this, we encourage you to reach out to Preston at preston.leftwich@pathlock.com. And or you can reach out to us at events@pathlock.com and we can schedule a demo for you.
Yep, and we'd be able to kind of go through in a longer fashion. It takes about half hour. We can go through the sort of demonstration of how the workflow works, the approval processing, and some of the reports that we can get generated out of there, so you can sort of see that life cycle process of how we provision and work with the data. Be happy to do that, obviously, at your leisure.
Okay, great. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now, so I just wanted to thank everybody for attending and thank Preston, and we hope to see you at future events.
Thank you all very much.